lot of new cards revealed recently. Let's start with Injured Kvaldir. Forgive my pronunciation. A 1-mana 2/1, since Battlecry deal 3 damage to this minion. Clearly made with Priest in mind. Another target to get circle healing, but not really strong. I don't really see it fitting into the Priest deck, even though it most obviously fits into that deck. Patron? Play it with Battle Rage? No, it's far too specific. So yeah, I don't really see it being used and constructed. Arena, this is a 1-mana 2/1. Except in Priest, then it's a 3-mana 2/3. Not very exciting there either. Brave Hunter! For the Hunter! Oh! Its name is actually Brave Hunter. Like, I didn't know that this was going to be the name because it was just recently translated. That is spot on, Blizzard. I applaud you. Brave, pretty good movie. This card, not very good though. It's good design at least. Another excellent pun. People compare this card to Leper Gnome, and it's worse than Leper Gnome. I mean, there are like really specific cases where you draw this in the late game, and then it's like, haha, I get to use my hero power and immediately deal 2, whereas Leper Gnome would have taken a turn because of Death Rattle, but those cases are too specific. Now then, you could ask the question of, do you want to run both Brave Hunter and Leper Gnome? But it turns out that Brave Hunter is so weak in the early game that you would probably want to run something else. In Arena, this is just going to be a 1-mana 2/1, and it's not going to be good. Druid of the Saber! Basically 2 choices. It can be a 2-mana 2/1 charge, Bluegill Warrior, or it can be a 2-mana 3/2 stealth. We haven't seen a 2-mana 3/2 stealth yet. We've seen a 2-mana 2/3 stealth. This one gets the flexibility. It's nice. Both versions are beasts. So here's another fun card for your Druid Beast deck. Hey, I might look into that for the free-to-play next month, since a lot of the Druid Beast cards are value and they're low cost. The fact that it's a beast does make it quite a bit better. You can put it in stealth, and then that's something guaranteed for your Druid of the Fang to buff into. Whether or not a Druid Beast deck, even with these Druid Beasts that keep getting released every so often, is going to be viable, and whether or not this card will be a part of it remains to be seen. Because the only Druid Beast synergy card still remains Druid of the Fang, and that card's good, but it's not quite good enough to justify building a Beast deck off of. I'm hopeful that we'll see a Beast synergy card, like something that takes advantage of Beasts in Druid, in which case Druid of the Saber will get a significantly higher rating. In Arena, this card will also be good because both the Bluegill Warrior and the Gilblin Stalker are fine cards, and this one has the flexibility to be both, and there's a time and place for both. Sometimes you really need to kill the thing, sometimes you can just let it stay for a while. In Constructed, you can Savage Roar this since it has stealthed, but the flexibility isn't quite as important. It's more of power in Constructed, and I don't think in the normal Druid deck this card has quite enough power to justify the inclusion. Bolster, a nice fun warrior card. You have your taunt minions +2/+2. So we'll start by saying this card is bad if you have only 1 taunt. It's really bad if you have only 0 taunts. Bad when you have 1 taunt because in the taunt heavy ramp druid, for example, Mark of the Wild +2/+2 for 2 mana is not played. 1 target is not good enough. But if you have 2, then that's value. 2 mana, 4/4. But how are you going to have 2 taunts out on the board reliably? You can't. So the card is trash. It is interesting to note, though, that they're pushing some taunt synergy into Warrior. We've got 2 trash Warrior cards now. We've got Bolster, and we've got King's Defender. Though before calling it absolute trash and Constructed, I suppose I should consider the potential, because there are 2 cards which do give 2 things taunt, Defender of Argus and Sun Fury Protector. If you have 2 minions on the board, and then you play your Sun Fury, and then you play Bolster, that's a relatively cheap way to ensure that you're going to get 2 things taunted and buffed. Still not good enough. In Arena, this card is going to be super trash. Ancestral Knowledge. Why does this card have Overload 2? Overload 1 would have been just fine. That's basically what I thought when I saw the card. Poor Shamans. I thought they deserved something better. But 4 mana, draw 2 cards. I cry every time. Like, Shaman are weak, so they deserved something better. They deserved something better! Why? This could have been such a good card if it was Overload 1. It could have been so good! It was what I wanted! But then it was Overload 2. All you need to do is change one number and it'll be like a playable card, and it would be interesting. But instead, it's trash. Oh, so close. In Arena, this card is probably also too slow, and would be considered a below average pick. Master of Ceremonies, a fun card, and a fine card. I like it when cards have like a prerequisite to them in order to make them efficient. I think that's an interesting part of deck building. We've got a 3 mana 4/2 with the potential to be a 3 mana 6/4. 6/4 is pretty good for 3 mana, but obviously this doesn't fit into any pre-existing decks, so you start thinking about which cards with spell damage actually work out with Master of Ceremonies. Ones that are commonly run right now are Blood Mage Thalnos, and Valen's Chosen, and Eadric, and the Shaman spell power totem, I guess. It is tough to actually combo Master of Ceremonies with the Eadric though, just because it costs so much mana, and the card is fragile. And it's hard to combo it with Blood Mage Thalnos because it's a 1/1, unless you cast Blood Mage Thalnos and then you cast Master of Ceremonies, which turns out to be a pretty good play, but Thalnos is kind of a 2 mana card. So then maybe it's reasonable to combo it with Valen's Chosen, since Valen's Chosen makes it a more durable card, but yeah, that's really slow. And even if you do get the buff, which seems pretty hard to do, you still only get a 3 mana 6/4. That's really good, yes, but it's a lot of work to get a 6/4, and it seems inconsistent, and it's difficult. So I like the card. Hard to use. I don't really see it being played with the existing cast of spell damage cards we have. If it were to be, the 2 most likely candidates would be Priest with Valen's Chosen and Shaman with the Totem. You just eventually roll the spell damage totem, and then you get a 6/4. Interesting cards that are reasonable, which aren't being played right now. Suit Spewer from Mage, but I don't think that justifies like a Mage deck with Suit Spewer and Blood Mage Thalnos and Cobalt Geomancer for Master of Ceremonies. An amusing thought is this is the card that Mini Mage was printed for to work with, since your Stealth Mini Mage is probably going to be enough to get the Master of Ceremonies on. But no, I don't really see that working either. In Arena, it's going to be a 3 mana 4/2, and that's not very good. Here we have a fun, colorful card, and I think the colorfulness of the card suits it really well. The most notable comparison is to the Priest card Thoughtsteal, which adds 2 random cards from the opponent's deck to your hand. This Rogue class card adds 2 random class cards to your hand from your opponent's class. Notably, it can add minions, and that's good because class minions tend to be above average. Given that Control Priests run Thoughtsteal, I actually think this is a reasonable card in a Rogue control deck, because if Priest control is running it, why not Rogue control? One of the weaknesses of Rogue control was the lack of card draw, after all. Think of all the awesome things you could steal. You can steal Tyrion. You can steal 2 Tyrion. You can steal Archmage Antonidas. Just a nice 3 mana draw 2 cards. The cards are going to be, on average, like weaker, but they're still going to be 2 cards. And Rogue can use them all fairly well if they're a control deck. I like the card. It boosts a deck archetype that's not seen right now of Control Rogue. And in Arena, this card's also going to be good. Basically 3 mana, draw 2 cards. That's fine. Bash. Very simple card, but elegant and good. Rip Drain Life, as a lot of people have mentioned. Drain Life being a Warlock card, which deals 2 and gains 2 life. We've decided to increase it by 50%. Turn it into a Warrior card. 2 mana, deal 3 damage, has tended to be pretty good. Add 1 mana to tack on a 3 armor effect. Nice. Probably the hard part of thinking about it would be, Like, what do you cut in Control Warrior for it, if you are? Control Warrior has kind of always had a few flex spots, like the Whirlwind, the Revenge, the second Brawl, the Tech card. Could just be replaced with the solid Bash. Could replace maybe a Shield Block, could replace maybe a Shield Maiden. Notably, a lot of good 3 damage minions out there right now, like Paladin Shredder. Just bash them, bash, and then finish it with your Fiery Wind Axe. Probably won't make the cut in Patron Warrior, because it doesn't draw a card. Slam tends to be better for Patron Warrior, and I don't really see Slam getting ousted. Shield Block has recently been in Patron Warrior. I suppose I wouldn't be surprised to see it in Patron Warrior. Maybe 1 copy. Just a nice solid overall card. Arena-wise, health doesn't matter as much as Constructed, interestingly enough, because the health gain matters against those decks which can do a specific number of damage, which in Constructed is common. But in Arena, it tends to be that it's just all about board control, and then your minions do like infinite amounts of damage over time. So interestingly enough, it's a card that's weaker in Arena than in Constructed, because the 3 armor gain isn't as important. Still a reasonable card though. Probably like average in Arena. Gormok, the Impaler! 4 mana, 4/4. If you have at least 4 other minions, deal 4 damage. I can't remember the last time that I could reliably get 4 minions on the field. It's impossible. Put it in your patron deck, and then you go like Warsong Commander, Grim Patron, you can reliably get 4 patrons, and then pow, Gormok the Impaler. No, that doesn't work. Card is trash. But interesting. But trash. You can't reliably get 4 minions in Zoo either. If you're winning by that much, you usually don't want to play this card. So, yeah. No good. I don't think it's good in Zoo. Muster for battle combo? No, you would just use Quartermaster. Implosion, then Gormok? No, you don't want to run an 8 mana combo in Zoo. So, trash. I have to like actually think about it for a moment, because these are the easiest cards to get wrong. The cards which, when the condition is met, are actually really good, because 4 mana, 4/4 Battlecry, deal 4 damage. That's insane. But the difficulty of getting 4 other minions is way too difficult. So, no, I'll take a pass on this one. No good. In Arena, below average. But a 4 mana 4/4 is actually above quite a few of the really bad legendaries out there. It is worth mentioning though that this is about as powerful as you could have made the card. It's interesting to note that, because you can't make it a 4 mana 4/5, that would be too strong. But, you know, 4 mana 5/4, I could get behind that. Yeah, I think this could have been a 4 mana 5/4. And it would still possibly be bad. But they could have pushed the envelope a little bit more on that one. Crowd favorite. It's not going to work. Questing Adventurer is a card, which is 3 mana 2/2. Whenever you play any card, gets +1/+1. Since there's a card that costs 1 less mana and isn't being played and constructed right now, and yes, it does start off weaker, like that could be a 3 mana 3/3. You can tell that crowd favorite won't work. There's going to be some people who try to make like a Battlecry deck with crowd favorite and be flavored, but I don't really see it working. Worth noting that there's a lot more Battlecry effects in the set because of the jousting mechanic, which I will cover later. But no, you don't even want to put the crowd favorite into that deck. Not too hard to make this a 4 mana 5/5. You play it, and then you play a card with Battlecry, and there's a few good ones that cost 1 mana, like Abusive Sergeant, and that's about it. And there's like a few good 2 mana ones of Battlecry. And like the old Zoo did run a lot of Battlecry cards, like Dark Iron Dwarf, and Defender of Argus, and Shad Sun Cleric, and Abusive Sergeant, but I don't really see that working there either. Just a bit too slow to get going. In Arena, hard to actually make a deck with a lot of Battlecry, so it's gonna be usually a below average 4 mana 4/4. Shado-Pan Cavalry. I like this card a lot. I'll start off by saying that. Doesn't fit into any archetype right now for Rogue. It seems like it would be good in a Rogue control deck, and hey, I love cards which push an archetype which is not currently around. When you combo it, becomes a 5 mana 6/7. Pretty good. If you coin it, you get a 4 mana 6/7, and that's going to be a pretty big deal on whether or not you have the coin. SI7 agent is always going to be in every deck, so you're still going to want to coin the SI7 agent, but if you have Shado-Pan Cavalry, you're also going to be tempted to wait for that. Backstab is really good, of course. You can backstab on turn 5, play a Shado-Pan Cavalry also. Hard to say whether or not this card will be good enough. It probably won't make the cut in Oil Rogue. Oil Rogue cannot support putting in this card, I believe. I mean, the stats are really tempting, 5 mana 6/7, but I think a 5 mana 6/7 isn't quite good enough. Because when you think about it, Oil Rogue is a deck that already is cutting the Violet Teacher sometimes, which is a 4 mana 3/5, but arguably you can get 2 students with it consistently. In which case it's a 4 mana 5/7 when you combo it with spells. And it's like, that one isn't being run 2 of, so for a similar reason, Shado-Pan Cavalry, maybe not. I mean, even when you cast it as a 5 mana 3/7, it doesn't suck. Suppose a vanilla card, 5 mana 3/7 were to come out, I'd be like, this is bad and constructed, but like reasonable in Arena. No, actually, I'd say it's bad in Arena, but not like that bad. But the fact that it can be a 6/7, that's really good. I like the card. I'll be trying it out in my Rogue Control deck. In Arena, the card will be very good because it's a 5 mana 6/7. In a world where Boulder Fist Ogre is really good, Shado-Pan Cavalry will be really good. Mukla's Champion, the card that demonstrates how Inspire will not work when you don't put it on a card with competitive stats. It's a 5 mana 4/3. That's bad. Even if it were a 5 mana 4/3 and it didn't have the text Inspire there and just said like give your other minions +1/+1, it would still not be good enough. So that you have to get the Inspire effect, that's not going to work out. It's probably worth noting that even if this card were a 5 mana 5/5, I would probably have a tough time rating it. I'd probably still call it bad, but since it's a 5 mana 4/3, it's a lot easier to just call it trash. The concept of Inspire is you can like use it repeatedly. You're not only getting +1/+1, you're gonna like get +2/+2 if you push the button twice. Sweet, but that's not going to work. You don't have enough time to do that. It's not even gonna fit the Druid Beast deck synergy, which is a beast. Seems like Mukla is going to lose this joust. In Arena, it's also a 5 mana 4/3, and it's not going to make the cut. And in Arena, it's worth mentioning that Stormwind Champion is actually a card that gets played. But that's a 7 mana 6/6, and Mukla's Champion would basically be a 7 mana 4/3. It is worth noting that the +1/+1 like sticks around, unlike the Stormwind Champion, but still, it's okay. You can't really count on a gorilla to be that smart in sending out the champion. Eadric the Pure! Paladins get a dungeon boss. Hooray. You look at the stats. It's a 3/7 for 7 mana. That text better be really good. So the easiest comparison is to Elder Peacekeeper. 3 mana 3/3. You change a enemy minion's attack to 1. So for 4 extra mana, you get 4 extra health, which is obviously not good. But you change all enemy minions to 1. Is this the counter to Patron that everyone's been thinking? They fill their board with patrons. Eadric the Pure, pow! Now they have a board of a 1/3. They have like a lot of 1/3s. Is that going to work? That's about the only deck I can think of there out right now which has a lot of minions. Yeah, this card probably could have had more stats. I would have been willing to give Control Paladin the extra boost. Against Handlock, you do get rid of 2 giants, but like Equality already did that. The Blizzard playtesters probably tried it out at different attack values. I have to imagine at one point it had higher stats, and then like Eadric the Pure kept getting played, and like everyone else kept getting wrecked. So eventually they brought it down to a 3/7. Like, that's my guess. Anyways, as stands, I think there's just not enough stats here. It's really difficult to come back in the game when the opponent has that many minions anyways. But I mean, hey, if they do have a lot of minions, like you play the Eadric the Pure, like that's actually the place to do it. It's so specific though, because you would normally just do Equality if they had a lot of minions and then finish it off with Consecration. So this one doesn't even really finish the job. I think it's weak. I think it's really weak. But It is a board sweeping effect. To some extent, I'm like almost scared to just call the card bad, because this is the type of card which would have been play tested and then eventually nerfed to this state, I imagine. I'm like paranoid almost that I'm gonna call a good card bad, but no, this can't possibly be good when Elder Peacekeeper is already in the game. I'm not seeing it. So I think Eadric the Pure is quite bad. Even in Arena, I hesitate to call this card good. Like, maybe it would be average in Arena. Perhaps one of the easiest ways to think of a card and whether or not it'd be good is to think of it in like Arena, a field where it's all about board control and minions fighting, which is where Eadric the Pure shines. Like, even there, I wouldn't be that excited to pick this card up. So therefore, I guess I can say it's like not very good. Rip Paladins. I think they could have used a good legendary, especially control Paladins. The only thing that's needed to make this card better is like just raise the stat value a bit. I don't know at what level it would become like too good, but certainly they could have done better than 3/7. Aviana. It's a 9 mana 5/5, so the card text better be really good. Okay, the good news is the card text is really good. And it's kind of nice that this is in Druid, because it's the class that can actually go Aviana and then Innervate and then play like 2 minions. Or turn 10 Aviana and then minion. Or turn 10 Aviana and then minion. People are going to be wondering how this interacts with Emperor Thaurissan. From my experience, and this is also what was stated by a Blizzard person, Aviana and then Thaurissan will give you a discount, and then your minions will cost 0. But specifically, you would have to play Aviana first, I imagine. And that's a lot harder, to play Aviana and then play Emperor Thaurissan. Like, you could play Aviana and Emperor Thaurissan on the same turn, but then your Aviana is not going to live. If your opponent does not deal with Aviana, though, you probably win, but, like, immediately. But a 5 health guy on 9 mana, that's going to be dealt with. Like, an easy comparison is Ysera. Ysera is almost like if you can't deal with it immediately, you lose. But that's what makes Ysera good. The fact that it can actually independently survive. The fact that it has 12 health. Aviana, poor Aviana only has 5. Probably the best play that you could make is Aviana Ysera, but then you're basically only getting the value in the case that you have exactly Aviana and then like a big card. And it's almost like in that circumstance you get a 0 mana 5/5 super taunt. Is that worth it? Like, it might be. I'm hopeful. I'm inspired to build an Aviana deck just because the effect is so powerful. But I gotta admit, I'm not really seeing it. Yeah, you can do Aviana and Kel'Thuzad, and then they have to get through both Kel'Thuzad and Aviana. I like it a lot. This one shakes things up. I originally was like, this card is trash. 9 mana 5/5, but supposing the metagame were to slow down enough. And the fact that it costs 9 mana is important as opposed to 10 mana, because on 10 mana you play Aviana and you play a big threat. Then like your big threat gets some heat taken off of it because Aviana needs to die. The chances that you can do Aviana, Innervate, big card, you might see some really insane combos. Looks like the best combo my chat could come up with in a quick moment was you play Aviana and then you Innervate. You play Aviana on turn 10. You Innervate out Malygos, Faceless for plus 15 spell damage, and then you double Moonfire. And that is 32 damage. That's a combo. Anyways, it is a cool card. Either it comes up with some incredibly broken deck like Patron Warrior, or it's completely useless. It's the toughest type of card to evaluate. I think my money would be on it being completely useless. But I say that with such great hesitation because that is a serious effect. So I'm excited that they printed the card. Like, it doesn't even have to be one or the other, because even if you play at turn 10 and you play Ysera, it's a free 5/5. Well, it's a 1 mana 5/5. Because the Aviana is like, it took 1 mana, and then the Ysera is just as normal. But yeah, this will usually take too much time to set up. But I'm just thinking about like all the ramp druids I've played over the times. Like, I usually run Ysera and Cenarius and Sneeds. And you could go Aviana, Innervate, Cenarius, Sneeds, Kel'Thuzad, and that would be a lot of fun. But thinking about it, I don't think it's very practical to include a card that's all but worthless unless you draw it in the late game on 10 mana with specific cards. Yep, so, meh. Oh, and in Arena this card is really bad. Anub'arak. I think this one's got a cool effect. So the stats are obviously no good for... the stats are obviously no good for 9 mana. 4 health? But it just keeps coming back with 4/4 Nerubians. Woo! I'm a fan of cards which have infinite potential. And this is one of those cards. It's like every single turn you can get a 4/4 Nerubian on the board. It'll take all of your mana though. I'll make a comparison with Magic. Like one of my favorite cards was Whispers of the Muse, which was 1 mana draw a card, but you could buy it back into your hand for 5 mana, and then it looked kind of ridiculous. Like it was 6 mana, and then you like draw a card, but you can also draw another card, and then you can just keep it going. Anub'arak is kind of like that. You keep getting those 4/4s. This is different from Malorne, which I correctly called bad when it came out, because Malorne was even slower. It didn't go back to your hand, it went back to your deck. This one goes back to your hand. So it's a lean, mean Nerubian summoning machine. But yeah, it'd probably cost a bit too much. What the deck that it would fit into is Control Rogue, and that's kind of a theme because I've reviewed 2 cards that are good for Control Rogue already. Anub'arak could be that finisher, but a finisher which gets dismantled by silence. Turn 9, Anub'arak. Turn 10, Deathwing. That's sick. It's one of those, dang, I sure wish that this card couldn't be silenced. And even then it probably wouldn't be good enough, it's just too slow. So yeah, probably too slow and constructed, but a cool card nonetheless. Could have used a bit more health, but, you know, I understand that this is like a very unique effect, and it's all about that lasting power. Probably could have cost less mana. It's a card. In Arena, with less silence effects rolling around, I think this card is actually reasonable in Arena. Good late game, like just keeps coming back card. The king of top decking. I'm gonna just kind of ballpark it as average to above average in Arena. Okay, and that does it for this review. Also out is the Joust cards, which I will get to in the next one, since this one has taken a bit. And I've got some crazy math to do for the Joust.